They think being loud is power. They think being feared is dominance. But the smartest people in the room, they're not the ones taking up all the space. They're the ones watching in silence, collecting information while everyone else competes for attention. See, most people are playing checkers, fast, obvious, emotional. But the ones who win, they're playing chess, quiet, calculated, 5 steps ahead, while you're still reacting to move 1. You don't have to be the most educated. You don't have to be the most experienced. But if you understand how people think, what drives them, what they fear, and where they're blind, you hold the key, not just to surviving the game, but controlling it. The goal isn't to dominate through force. It's to dominate through understanding. Outsmarting someone doesn't mean embarrassing them. It means positioning yourself so strategically that they don't even realize you've won until it's already over. The world doesn't hand power to the loud. It hands power to the wise. And the person who masters their mind, studies their environment, and moves without ego, that person becomes unstoppable. So if you're tired of being underestimated, if you're done letting people play you like a game they think you'll never figure out, then stay here, because what comes next isn't just strategy, it's your blueprint for total dominance. Everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to talk, prove, explain, justify. But what if I told you the most powerful person in any room isn't the one who speaks first? It's the one who watches in silence and gathers everything they need before making a single move. Observation is the most underrated skill when it comes to power, influence, and dominance. People reveal everything about themselves, not when they're being interrogated, but when they think no one's really listening. Most people miss that. They rush to speak, they rush to defend, they rush to be seen. And in that rush, they reveal all their cards without realizing they're sitting across from someone who hasn't even lifted their hand yet. Mastering the power of observation is about becoming hyper-aware of your environment, the people in it, and most importantly, the unspoken. It's not just about what they say, it's about what they don't say. It's the way someone answers a question too quickly, or the way they pause when you bring up a certain topic. The nervous glance, the overcompensation, the need to prove, the subtle cues that scream louder than words ever will. Powerful people read the room before they ever walk into it. They notice where the energy shifts when certain names are spoken. They watch how people treat those they don't need anything from. They listen to how people talk about themselves, and whether it's grounded in truth or masked in performance. Observation is your early warning system. It tells you who's real and who's pretending. It tells you where the real influence is and where the noise is coming from. It gives you insight into someone's values, insecurities, power plays, and blind spots, all without them knowing you're collecting that data. But this kind of observation requires discipline. You have to silence your own need to be understood. You have to be okay with not always jumping in. Because every time you interrupt the moment to center yourself, you're giving away an opportunity to learn them. Most people walk into a room thinking, how can I impress them? The ones who dominate walk in thinking, what do I need to learn from this? That shift alone changes everything. When you master observation, you no longer need to force respect. You no longer have to over-explain or overcompensate. You become strategic because your silence is not weakness, it's awareness. Your stillness is not fear, it's calculation. Your quiet presence doesn't mean you're passive. It means you're watching everything and everyone. And here's the truth. People reveal more when they're not under pressure. So let them talk, let them overshare, let them try to impress you, manipulate you, distract you. And while they're busy trying to control the room, you're sitting back, taking notes. Because once you know what someone really wants, what they're hiding, what they're afraid of, you hold the leverage. You can't outmaneuver what you don't understand. And you'll never understand people if you don't observe them with precision. Every conversation is a test. Every interaction is a lesson, but only if you're paying attention. It's not enough to listen for what's said. You need to watch how it's said. Look at the eyes, watch the body, measure the breath. The person who says I'm fine but avoids eye contact, that's information. The one who over-explains a simple question, they're hiding something. The person who talks in circles and avoids clarity, That's not intelligence. That's evasion. Your job isn't to respond right away. Your job is to see everything before you respond. Because when you do speak, your words are sharp, strategic, and impossible to ignore. Not because they're loud, but because they're rooted in truth. And that's the power of silence, of restraint, of deep, intentional observation. It makes you dangerous not because you're violent, but because you're prepared. You don't need to dominate with noise. You dominate with awareness. You walk into situations already equipped with what people are still trying to hide. And that's when you can control the outcome, because you're 5 steps ahead playing a game they didn't even know had started. So, the next time you walk into a room, resist the urge to speak first. Watch, listen, take your time. Everyone else is rushing. You're not. You're calculating, you're studying, and when you finally move, it's precise, powerful, and impossible to ignore. Master the power of observation before you speak, and you'll never have to raise your voice to be heard again. The moment you lose your emotional control, you hand over your power. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are, how sharp your strategy is, or how right you feel. If someone can pull you out of your center, they already control the game. That's the truth most people ignore. They think reacting shows strength, that showing passion means power. But the people who dominate any room, any conversation, any confrontation, they don't get loud, they don't flinch, they stay calm, quiet, unreadable. Because the calmest person in the room is always the most dangerous. Staying emotionally neutral doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you learn how to manage your emotions instead of letting your emotions manage you. There's a difference between suppression and control. Suppression is avoidance, control is discipline. And discipline is where your real power lives. Most people operate like open circuits. Whatever someone throws at them, they absorb it. You insult them, they insult you back. You challenge them, they feel the need to prove. You test them, they rise out of pride instead of purpose. That's not power. That's being easily manipulated. It's being emotionally hijacked by someone who knows how to press the right buttons. People will push you to react, not always consciously. Sometimes they're testing your boundaries. Sometimes they're projecting their own insecurities. Sometimes they're just looking for a fight to feel alive. But none of that has anything to do with you. What matters is whether or not you give them access to your emotional landscape. The key is simple. Don't meet chaos with chaos. When someone tries to provoke you, stay still, not passive, still. That stillness is what keeps you clear-headed. It's what helps you assess the real situation beneath the noise. Because in every emotional outburst, there's a deeper truth. Anger hides fear. Control hides insecurity. Loudness hides desperation. When you're emotionally neutral, you can see through the surface and recognize what's actually going on. You don't get caught in the bait. You don't escalate. You evaluate. And when you do respond, you do it from a place of strategy, not ego. Understand this: when someone can predict your reaction, they can control the outcome. If every time someone disrespects you, you explode, you're predictable. If you cry every time you feel ignored, you're predictable. If your mood is determined by how others treat you, you've already surrendered the steering wheel. Emotional neutrality gives you options. When you're calm, you can choose how to respond, when to respond, and if it's even worth responding at all. That's the real win. Because the person who stays composed isn't weak, they're in charge. That kind of control is what separates leaders from followers, masters from amateurs, dominance from desperation. You become someone who doesn't flinch in the face of pressure, someone who doesn't need external validation to hold internal certainty. And let's be real, there's power in not being reactive. It's unnerving to people. It throws them off. When they expect you to break and you don't, it confuses them. When they try to push you and you don't budge, they start questioning themselves. They lose control of the game because the target they were aiming for isn't playing by the rules anymore. But none of that is possible if you haven't trained yourself. Emotional neutrality isn't natural. It's built. You don't just wake up one day with complete composure. You earn it by sitting with your triggers, by dissecting your patterns, by asking yourself, why did that get to me? And then working backwards to understand the root. Because once you understand your emotional triggers, people can't use them against you anymore. What used to break you starts bouncing off of you. What used to shake you becomes information, not intimidation. This doesn't mean you become cold. It means you become clear. Clear enough to see through manipulation. Clear enough to spot insecurity when it's masked as confidence. Clear enough to know when someone's trying to hijack your energy, and wise enough not to let them. Emotional control is power. It's leverage. It's the silent weapon you carry into every conversation, every negotiation, every confrontation. It doesn't matter how chaotic the world gets, your world stays anchored. And people notice. They don't always know why, but they feel it. Your energy changes the temperature of the room. Your presence creates pressure without words. That's what happens when you control yourself. You don't just play the game, you redefine it. So the next time someone tries to pull you into drama, into emotion, into reaction, pause, breathe, observe. Remind yourself you don't owe anyone access to your emotions. Just because they're loud, you don't have to explain your silence. You don't have to defend your calm. You just have to own it. Because the person who stays emotionally neutral doesn't just survive the storm, they become the storm. Quiet, focused, unstoppable. Most people believe power comes from having the right answers. But those who truly dominate in any interaction know the truth. Real power lies in asking the right questions. Not just any questions, strategic ones. Questions that peel back the mask, questions that expose motives, questions that force people to reveal more than they plan to. And you don't do this by being aggressive. You do it by being intentional, calm, surgical, focused. You don't need to interrogate anyone to get what you want. You just need to learn how to guide the conversation in a way that makes them want to talk. Because people love to talk about themselves, especially when they think they're in control. But while they're talking, you're gathering intelligence. You're mapping out who they are, what drives them, what scares them, and how they operate, all through the questions you choose to ask and the ones you intentionally avoid answering. Strategic questioning is not about getting to the facts. It's about getting to the psychology. You're not trying to find out what someone did. You're trying to understand why they did it, what pattern drove them there, what need they're trying to fill, what insecurity they're hiding under the surface of their performance. And here's where it gets interesting. When people are trying to impress you, they talk more. When people are trying to deceive you, they over-explain. And when people are unsure of you, they try to define the space quickly. So instead of jumping in to control the narrative, let them speak, let them reveal. Then strike, not with opinion, but with a question that cuts through their image and makes them uncomfortable. You ask, what makes you say that? What does that mean to you? Why was that important? What did you expect to happen? And you watch how long they pause, whether they deflect, whether they get defensive, or whether they suddenly feel the need to justify something they weren't even asked. That's the moment you see the real person, not the polished version, the raw one, the unguarded one, the one who just stepped into territory they weren't prepared for. That's when they tell you everything. Strategic questions also buy you time. When you're in a negotiation, a heated conversation, or a confrontation, asking questions shifts the pressure. It gives you space to think while making the other person work harder. And while they're speaking, you're scanning, you're analyzing patterns, inconsistencies, emotional tells. You're watching if they're trying to sell you something or if they're speaking from truth. And let's be clear, not all questions are designed to get answers. Some are meant to throw people off their script, to force them into unfamiliar territory, to take them out of their rehearsed lines and make them actually think. That's when the real answers come out, when the autopilot shuts off. But here's the part most people miss. You don't just ask questions. You listen to the answers deeply. You don't interrupt. You don't race to respond. You absorb. Because every answer contains a blueprint of how someone thinks, what they fear, what they value, what they're trying to protect. And once you know that, you know how to navigate them. This isn't manipulation, it's intelligence gathering, it's leadership. It's understanding the full landscape before making your next move. Because you don't dominate situations by force. You do it by insight. You make smarter moves because you see more than everyone else in the room. And here's the thing. When you ask strategic questions, you also learn who's real and who's not. The people who are solid don't get defensive. They answer clearly, calmly, directly. The ones who are bluffing, they get nervous, they circle around, they try to shift the spotlight back to you. And in doing so, they expose their own game. Sometimes you don't even need to respond. The question is the response. It forces reflection. It makes people realize you're not someone they can easily read or manipulate. You're not on autopilot. You're deliberate, and that makes them recalibrate their entire approach to you. In the most powerful use of a question, when someone thinks they've backed you into a corner and you simply say, "What outcome are you hoping for here?" That question puts the pressure right back where it belongs. It forces accountability. It forces clarity. It makes them pause, and in that pause, they show you everything. Strategic questions are how you guide people without them realizing they're being guided. You lead the dance without ever stepping in front, and when the time comes to make your move, you're doing it with full awareness because they've already told you who they are, what they want, and how they operate. All you had to do was ask. Mastering this doesn't make you talk more. It makes you talk smarter. And that's the difference between playing the game and owning the game. Ego is the loudest liar in the room. It wants to be seen. It wants to win. It wants to prove something, even when nothing needs proving. And the moment you let your ego make the first move, you've already surrendered your power. Because ego doesn't operate from clarity. It operates from fear, from insecurity, from the desperate need to protect an image you think the world wants to see. But here's the truth. The strongest person in any situation is the one who doesn't need to be right, doesn't need to dominate the moment, and doesn't need to react emotionally just to feel significant. The strongest person is the one who can hold their ground in complete silence while their ego screams in the background. That's discipline, that's power, and that's rare. The urge to prove yourself is often the very thing that gives your opponent the upper hand. When you walk into a situation and let your ego dictate your behavior, maybe you interrupt too quickly, get defensive too fast, or brag unnecessarily to feel superior, what you're really doing is handing over your control. Because the minute your emotions run the show, you're no longer in charge. You're reacting, not responding. And reaction is predictable. Predictable people are easy to manipulate. When your ego makes the first move, it doesn't consider strategy. It doesn't see the long game. It just wants to feel good right now. But dominance, real dominance, is quiet. It's controlled. It's patient. It doesn't need the applause. It doesn't chase validation. It knows the truth will reveal itself, and the truth doesn't need to shout. Sometimes people will disrespect you just to see how much control you have. Not because they're stronger, but because they're testing your limits. They want to see if you'll break, if you'll explode, if you'll fall into the trap of defending yourself emotionally. They want you to fight on their terms, not yours. But if you've mastered your ego, you don't take the bait, you don't swing wildly just because someone poked you. You pause, you assess, you remain unshaken, not because you're weak, but because you know reacting emotionally gives them the blueprint to control you. Every outburst is a lesson to your opponent on how to pull your strings. But when you don't react, when you hold the line, you stay unreadable, unpredictable, untouchable. Ego also thrives on comparisons. It constantly wants to measure itself against others. Do they respect me? Do they think I'm important? Did I win that exchange? But the problem with that mindset is that it makes them the reference point. You're no longer focused on your path. You're now focused on how you appear in their story. Letting go of ego means you stop needing to outperform everyone around you. You stop needing to win every argument. You stop needing to correct every insult. Because you know your value isn't found in reactions. It's found in restraint. You choose when to speak, how to act, and what battles are worth fighting. That's not weakness, that's elite level control. It also means accepting that not every insult needs a response. Not every challenge is worth your energy. Sometimes people throw shade not because they're strong, but because they feel threatened. Your silence doesn't make you invisible. It makes you powerful. Because while they're trying to drag you into the dirt, you're standing above it, unmoved, watching them exhaust themselves trying to provoke a version of you that no longer exists. Ego wants the last word. Power doesn't need it. Ego wants attention. Power creates presence. Ego reacts. Power calculates. If you want to outsmart anyone, you cannot be led by pride. You have to be led by purpose. You have to be clear on who you are, what you want, and what truly matters. Because if you're not, you'll spend your life fighting for scraps of validation that mean nothing in the long run. You don't need to win every moment. You need to win the war. And sometimes the greatest victory is not in striking back, but in not being pulled in at all, not letting someone else's energy dictate your state, not allowing the pressure of ego to override the discipline of wisdom. The people who last, who build real legacy, influence, and strength, they aren't the loudest. They're the most controlled, the most intentional, the most self-aware, because they've learned that dominance isn't about overpowering others. It's about never being overpowered by yourself. So the next time you're tempted to jump in, to clap back, to prove you're not to be disrespected, ask yourself, is this about strategy or is this about ego? Am I acting with purpose or with pride? If it's ego, pause, breathe, step back, let the silence speak, let your calmness become their discomfort, let your composure become your weapon. Because the one who can master their ego can master anyone. Most people think dominance is about showing force, about clashing, overpowering, proving superiority in the heat of battle. But the real masters, the ones who own every room, win every game, and walk away untouched. They rarely fight at all. They win by making their opponents unravel themselves quietly, strategically, without lifting a finger. Because when you truly understand how power works, you realize this: the most efficient way to beat someone is to let them beat themselves. When you go head to head with someone, you're expending energy, you're revealing your hand, you're engaging on their level. But when you stay calm, composed, and 10 steps ahead, you flip the script. You remove their control by refusing to play by their rules. You turn their own emotional instability, their impulsiveness, their pride into the very weapons that dismantle them. This isn't weakness, it's precision warfare. It's mental jujitsu. You don't resist force with force. You redirect it. You allow their desperation, their need for dominance, their lack of emotional discipline to create openings they don't even know they're exposing. The key: don't react, just watch. People who are insecure, manipulative, or power-hungry always push for a reaction. They poke, they provoke, they create tension, because if they can get you to lose your composure, they win control. But the moment you respond with silence, with poise, with cold calculation instead of emotion, you flip the power dynamic instantly. Think about it: who's really in control? The one yelling and trying to dominate the moment, or the one who sits back, unbothered, gathering data, making no move until the perfect moment? Always the latter. Winning, without fighting, starts with restraint. That means you don't respond to every insult. You don't chase every challenge. You don't fall for every trap wrapped in ego and emotion. Instead, you step back and let them burn their own house down, trying to drag you into the fire. Because when people are emotionally driven, they make mistakes. They talk too much. They reveal too much. They underestimate you. And while they're distracted by their performance, you're seeing their patterns. You're calculating their weaknesses. You're quietly building leverage. That's when you strike, not with chaos, but with clarity. And sometimes striking doesn't mean attacking. It means walking away from a trap, exposing a truth without raising your voice, or setting a boundary so sharp it cuts without you ever raising a hand. You win not by destroying them, but by making them realize they've destroyed their own credibility, their own peace, their own control. You also win by never showing your full hand. Most people lose power because they overshare. They tell people what bothers them. They reveal their insecurities. They announce their plans. And in doing so, they arm their enemies. But the one who keeps their intentions quiet, their emotions sealed, and their movements calculated, that person becomes impossible to corner. This is how you dominate the game without playing the obvious one. Let others reveal themselves. Let them overextend, let them try too hard to impress, intimidate, manipulate. And while they're doing all that heavy lifting, you're in the background collecting leverage like currency, because knowledge, timing, and control are the real weapons, and you only sharpen those by observing, not reacting. Winning without fighting also means understanding that your time and energy are currencies. You don't spend them on petty people or temporary wins. You're not here to prove you're tough. You're here to outlast, outthink, and outmaneuver. And sometimes the best move is no move, just patience. Let people disqualify themselves. Let them show you who they are. Let them spiral when they can't shake your calm, because the louder they get, the more rattled they become, and the more unshaken you are, the more power you collect. Think of it like chess. You don't rush, you watch, you bait, you set up small traps, you sacrifice a pawn to take a queen, you wait for them to chase a win, and while they're doing that, you're dismantling their entire structure, one piece at a time. Dominance isn't about being feared, it's about being unmovable. It's about standing so firm in who you are that no attack gets past your guard, no insult finds your insecurity, no mind game pulls you off your purpose. You become so emotionally disciplined, so mentally clear, that people can't figure out how to defeat you because you refuse to play the same game. You've already elevated beyond it. That's the goal, to operate in such a way that people take themselves out trying to take you down, to walk through storms and let others exhaust themselves, throwing lightning, to sit in silence while others scream into the void waiting for a reaction you'll never give them. You don't need revenge. You don't need validation. You don't need the world to see your worth. You just need to keep showing up with clarity, control, and calculated intent. That's how you win.
Not with noise.
Not with ego, but by being the one who never breaks, never bends, and never lets their enemy know where the battle even started. Let them beat themselves. You just stay focused. Let this be the truth you carry with you. Dominance isn't noise. Power isn't proven through force. And intelligence isn't how much you say, it's how well you see. You don't need to outshout anyone. You don't need to convince anyone. And you certainly don't need to play on their level just to prove you can win. Outsmarting others is not about arrogance. It's about awareness. It's the calm mind in chaos. It's the sharp eye in distraction. It's the ability to sit still while everyone else self-destructs, chasing validation, ego, and short-term power plays. The moment you stop reacting emotionally, the moment you stop announcing your next move and start moving in silence, that's when you begin to shift from surviving the game to controlling it. Let them doubt you, let them misread your silence, let them run their mouths while you study the battlefield. Because in the end, the one who wins isn't the loudest, the flashiest, or the most feared. It's the one who never had to raise their voice. Because they already knew how it would end. Stay sharp, stay calm, and remember, the most dangerous person in the room is the one no one saw coming.